Investors turning their focus to the new year. For that, our next guest has 3 market themes that you need to be watching for 2025. We want to bring in Jim Tierney. He's the Chief Investment Officer of Concentrated U.S. Growth at AllianceBernstein. Jim, it's great to have you here. And I think one of the first themes that we want to talk about, and it's clearly a focus here of investors as of late, is AI. How critical, how big of a theme is that going to be in the market next year?
Really has dominated the market this year, and I think it will dominate the market next year. But I look at this as a train ride, and the first stop on the train was the semiconductor companies, and they benefited greatly in 2024. The next stop is who are the implementers, the hyperscalers, the software companies that will benefit. And ultimately, the third stop is everyday companies, but that'll take a while to get to that point. So I'm looking at 2025 as the year of the software company, and how do they implement it, and how do they sell it?
What does that mean for the Magnificent Seven? Because we are seeing profit growth estimates slowing. They're still huge, but slowing for the Mag 7 names. Does that mean the way to play AI in 2025 might be looking outside of those top 7 companies?
I actually think some of the Mag 7 are perfectly positioned. They've spent a ton of money, more than $200 billion of CapEx this year, probably more next year, with not a lot of visible return yet. But the key word there is yet. I think in 2025, we'll start to see that ramp up. Microsoft is a great example. They have Copilot out there. The results so far have been a little bit disappointing for investors, and it's probably why the stock hasn't kept up with some of the other Mag 7 stocks. But as they sell more of it, as companies embrace it, I think Microsoft is really going to get a bid here, and people are going to get excited about Microsoft again.
One of the other themes, or your second theme, that caught our attention was power consumption. And maybe on the surface is not something that sounds too sexy for our viewers here, but it is very interesting just in terms of that opportunity and what you think investors need to be watching for. So tell us about that and why that is critical here in the new year.
Because of efficiencies, we haven't had any growth in power consumption for decades. And we're starting to get to the point where there will be growth. Reshoring is a big opportunity. Data centers use a whole lot of power. So not only do we need more generation, but we need more transmission and we need more storage. All of that, if you say, well, it only grows 2 or 3%, the spending that you have to do in today's dollars is massive. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be an underestimated long-term driver of economic growth in the U.S.
Is there a name in the space that you're looking at?
Eaton is a great way to play it in terms of whether it's generation, whether it's transmission, whether it's storage, whether it's data centers. They play in all of those, and it's a U.S.-based company. The majority of their U.S. sales are manufactured in the U.S., so if tariffs come to pass, I'm not really worried about Eaton.
You know, that's so interesting, Jim, because I was just at Goldman's Industrial Materials Conference last week, and Eaton obviously an outperformer within that space. So it sounds like you actually think there's a lot more runway for that growth. I guess, what does that growth look like?
Exactly. Everybody thinks this is a 1 or 2 year trend. This is going to be a 5, 10, 15 year trend, both in terms of reshoring and data center usage.
To that end, too, I'm interested in your take on the impact of tariffs. We've spoken with lots of guests who see it as a big headwind for the macro picture, as it could lead to inflationary pressures. But I know there's one name in particular that you see as a beneficiary of tariffs because of the currency impact it could have on the peso. Talk to me about that.
I think you have to be careful in terms of where the tariffs are. Are they a threat? Are they a reality? And the threatened tariffs with Mexico and Constellation Brands. Constellation Brands is a brewer of Mexican beer. They exported out of Mexico to the U.S. Will tariffs be implemented against Mexico? Who knows? But with the depreciation of the peso over the last few months, much of that has already been offset. And instead, you have a company that's trading at 16 times earnings, cheaper than it's been in years and years, with growth in the consumer staples space. It's a real consumer staples growth company, tariffs or no tariffs.
How big of a risk, though, is tariffs?
Oh, it's meaningful, and do you want to pay 20% more for your beer or whatever it might be? Of course you don't as a consumer. So you have to be careful about how they're implemented, but I think it's more a threat than reality.
All right, Jim, thank you so much. We really appreciate you making time for us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.